Welcome to Nut Talk, where voices tease, stories melt, and every word dares you to stay. Let's begin. Chapter 1: Spark in the Sunset. Tessa swiped her forearm across her brow, leaving a dark streak of grease behind. She didn't care. It was the kind of mark she wore like armor, proof of a job done right. The sun melted across the horizon, spilling orange and blush pink across the private airstrip like a watercolor dream. The scent of jet fuel and sun-warmed asphalt lingered in the air, familiar and grounding. She was elbow-deep in the sleek underbelly of a jet, sleeves rolled, focus sharp, until the hum of a car sliced through the stillness. Whoa, powerful, intentional. Tessa straightened, one hand shielding her eyes from the sunlight. The black sports car that approached shimmered like obsidian under firelight. And when the driver's door opened, time seemed to slow. Dorian Roth stepped out, taller than expected, broader too. His presence was a gravitational shift. Everything around him seemed to still. The crisp lines of his tailored suit caught the sun like polished steel, and those eyes, icy blue, unreadable, locked onto her like a target acquired. He didn't belong here, not among tools and turbines. And yet, he fit in a way that felt dangerous. "Can I help you?" Tessa asked, masking her pulse with professionalism. Her voice carried calm, too practiced. He said nothing at first, just studied her, like she was part of the machinery he'd come to inspect. "I'm Dorian Roth," he said finally, voice deep and impossibly smooth. "I'm told you're the one working on my jet." Her brow arched. "Your jet." She tossed the rag aside and crossed her arms. Must have missed that line item on the invoice. Dorian's smile, if you could call it that, barely touched his mouth. "I prefer to keep tabs on my assets. And you, Tessa Morgan, come highly recommended." The way he said her name, measured, like a signature inked into air. She straightened. "Well, it's under control. No need for anyone breathing down my neck." He stepped forward, slowly, not invading but close enough to feel like a challenge. Clearly, it's rare to see someone this committed. Their eyes held for a beat too long. She didn't flinch. He didn't blink. This wasn't just a conversation. It was a test, a measuring of wills. "You'll have your plane," she said firmly, the steel in her voice matching the jet behind her. "And I promise, you won't be disappointed." Dorian paused, then nodded. "I'll hold you to that." And just like that, he turned, his silhouette cast long by the dying sun, like something out of a dream you're not sure you wanted to wake from. Tessa watched him go, tension curling low in her belly. He was all sharp edges and smooth words, and she hated that he got to her. But she had a jet to finish, and grease on her hands, and no time for men like Dorian Roth. Still, she didn't stop watching him until the car disappeared into the shadows. Chapter 2: Control and Surrender. The sun was slipping behind the hills, bleeding amber across the tarmac. The hangar hummed with quiet activity, just the way Tessa liked it. Her hands moved with focus, fingers wrapped around a modified turbine part, her mind locked into the mechanics, the whirring sound of tools and distant propellers soothing as a heartbeat. Then, tires on gravel. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. She felt him. Dorian Roth stepped from his obsidian car, every inch the sculpted embodiment of presence. Aviators on, dark suit crisp. He didn't walk so much as command the space with each step. His energy swept into the hangar like a controlled storm. The crew took notice. They always did. But before she could greet him, another engine growled. Another storm was coming. A silver vehicle rolled in, and out stepped Rafe Maddox, confidence carved into every muscle, his easy grin as familiar as the torque wrench in her palm. Rafe had worked here before, and with history between them, his arrival didn't feel like coincidence. "Still running the show?" he asked, his voice warm and slow, like bourbon poured over ice. "You know me," Tessa said, not missing a beat. "Still keeping things in the air." Rafe sauntered closer, casting a glance over the jet. "Mind if I take a look?" She gestured coolly. "Be my guest." But she felt Dorian watching, quiet, intense. Arms folded, mouth unreadable. There was tension in the air now. A tension Rafe seemed to revel in. And then Dorian spoke. "She's not your concern, Maddox?" Rafe turned, amusement curling at his lips. "So she's yours now?" "I'm not anyone's," Tessa snapped, stepping between them, voice like sharpened glass. "I run this place, remember?" Dorian's jaw tightened. "You're under my employ, Tessa. That means I care what happens to you." Her eyes narrowed. There's a difference between looking out for someone and trying to own them. Even Rafe blinked at that one. But Dorian held her gaze steady as ever. I see the way you lead here. You don't flinch. You don't falter. That kind of precision, that kind of dedication, it matters to me. She searched his face for a game, a tell, but all she saw was truth. Need it for what? She asked. Dorian's smile returned, slow and unreadable. You'll see. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the shadow of his storm. Tessa let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The hangar buzzed back to life, her crew resuming their rhythm, but she felt different, off balance, caught between two men who each pulled at something inside her, one with history, the other with gravity. She had always believed control was her strongest asset. But what if surrender, real, deliberate surrender, was the greater power? Chapter 3, Sunset's Aftermath. Tessa stepped out of the hangar office and into the cool night air, her skin kissed by a breeze that whispered against her sweat-slicked collarbone. The stars were just beginning to prick the velvet sky, but her thoughts were anything but peaceful. Her pulse still raced with echoes of the day, of him. Dorian Roth's presence clung to her like heat after lightning, electric and hard to breathe through. She wrapped her arms around herself, not for warmth, but for composure, control. Her usual armor felt thin tonight. Then, from the edge of shadow movement, a familiar figure emerged, leaning casually against the hangar siding, all rough confidence and silent longing. Rafe Maddox. Tessa, he said, voice softer than usual. You can feel it too, can't you? This thing between us, it never really burned out. Her breath faltered. Once she might have said yes. Once they'd been more than just flirtation and adrenaline. Rafe had touched parts of her life no one else had. But time, and Dorian, had rewritten the language of her longing. Still, the silence between them stretched, intimate and aching. Before she could respond, headlights split the dark. The rumble of a sports car shattered the moment like glass. Dorian Roth. He stepped from the vehicle, all shadows and sharp lines, his eyes locking instantly on her, and then on Rafe. Tension rippled like thunder beneath calm skies. Step away from her, Maddox, Dorian said, voice ablade in velvet. Rafe didn't move. She's not a possession, Roth. She chooses for herself. Dorian's jaw ticked. Then gently, then let her speak. Tessa stood still, wind threading through her hair, her heart pounding a beat that felt bigger than the sky. She turned to Rafe, eyes soft but resolute. You mattered to me. You always will. But this with Dorian, it's more than desire. It's direction. With him I build. I believe. Rafe's expression didn't crack, but his silence did. He nodded once, slow. Then I hope he never forgets what he has. He turned and walked into the darkness, swallowed by the quiet. Dorian approached. His voice now a murmur, you chose me. Tessa met his gaze, strong and steady. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. He took her hand and pulled her into his arms. His touch was no longer possession, it was reverence. The kind that says you are not mine because I own you, but because we chose each other in the storm. Then let me show you, Dorian whispered, what it means to be seen, cherished, never controlled. They stood like that, still, tangled in moonlight and emotion, until the wind softened and even the stars seemed to hush around them. Later, inside the jet, with moonlight spilling like silver over the seats, Dorian lit a single lantern near the window. Its soft glow bathed them in quiet gold. This isn't about power anymore, he said, settling beside her on the plush couch. It's about trust. Tessa leaned in, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Then I trust you. With my sky, with my fire. And there, under wings built for escape, they rested, curled into each other. No more mask, just breath and healing. But outside, in the darkness, a faint red light blinked once, then again. Hidden in the rafters, something, or someone, watched. The story wasn't done, not even close. Chapter 4, Submission, Secrets and Sovereignty. The elevator doors slid open with a quiet chime. Tessa stepped onto the cool marble floor of the penthouse, her heels clicking like punctuation against the silence. The suite was dark, lit only by the halo of city lights bleeding in through the towering windows. The skyline glowed behind glass, but it wasn't the view that stole her breath. It was the presence of two men, and the storm that waited in their silence. Dorian leaned against the marble bar, a crystal glass of whiskey balanced in his hand. His posture was relaxed, but his gaze sharpened, waiting. Rafe stood near the windows, arms folded, expression unreadable. Shadows danced along his jawline, catching the tension in every muscle. He didn't speak, didn't need to. The air between the three of them was heavy with something unspoken. A final breath before something inevitable. Tessa exhaled slowly. Her voice didn't tremble. "So this is where we are now," she said, her tone clear. "The two of you, waiting for me to choose?" Rafe's lips curved in that infuriatingly calm smirk. "You've always had the choice, Tessa. We're just here to hear it." Dorian's eyes stayed on her, unwavering. "Whatever happens next, it's in your hands." The pulse in her neck kicked harder, but not from fear. This wasn't about submission. This was about ownership. Hers. For too long, she'd been swept along in their orbit, drawn into their pull, their expectations, their heat. But now, standing at the axis of their want, she saw it all clearly. She wasn't the fire they circled. She was the one who held the match. She stepped into the center of the room, grounding herself between them. "No more games," she said. Her voice didn't raise. It didn't have to. "If either of you want me, then you'll need to show you can handle all of me on my terms." Dorian's mouth ticked into the faintest smile, like a man both impressed and provoked. "Fair enough," he said, voice low, reverent. Rafe's jaw tightened, his pride stung but not shattered. He gave a single nod. "Your call, Tessa." And it was. She stood taller, shoulders back, heart wide open, but shielded by conviction. This wasn't a moment of surrender. This was sovereignty. She wasn't choosing between them. She was choosing herself, and what version of her fire they were worthy to stand in. Whatever came next, she would walk into it not as a possession, but as a force. And only those who could meet her there with strength, respect, and truth would get to stay. Want the uncut version? The truth behind their tension? The choice she really makes? And what happens after lights go out? What you just read? That was only a taste. The heat, the whispered confessions, the scenes too wild for public air, they live where the mask comes off. Onlyfans.com/NuttleK. No censorship, no apologies, just fire. Real talk, real passion, real unfiltered. Come get what you really came for.